All right, it's great to be here. I hear this is winter in Perth, which feels like winter in Texas. So this is great. It's like being at home. I'll talk a little bit about the work that I do. It's based around a project called The Better Block, but I'll go a little bit about the history of the work that we've done to show what formed a lot of our ideas. So I'll just dive right in. One of the first kind of inspirations for me was seeing, this is in Montmartre, Paris. I don't know if anyone's been to Montmartre, but I remember first seeing this building when I was walking through the streets, and I remember thinking, man, I wish this was in my neighborhood. If it was there, I would go there every morning and have a cup of coffee. I would go and I love the little streets. I love the landscaping falling out of the buildings. You could live above it. I'd ask friends, what do you think about places like this? And they said, man, we wish we had this in our neighborhood too. We want to retire here. We put this on postcards. And I said, well, if we all collectively wish we had more places that look like this, then why do we keep building places that look like this? And that was the realization for a lot of our work, was understanding the places that we create like this, they don't matter. We don't care about them. We don't feel like we are a part of something that has a larger value system. We feel like we're just a commodity, right? So you guys know my background, though. I was not an urban planner or architect. I actually had a pretty boring day job. I was working on computers. I would be the guy sitting and changing out the cables and the servers in your rooms, at your offices. But my one kind of cool factor was at night, I did play in rock bands. And the nice thing about this was I got a chance to go around the country in the US and typically play in all what we thought of were the bad parts of town, working with a lot of artist communities who were really great at making something out of nothing, right? And learning from them and understanding how do we revitalize places with just our arts community. Other inspiration also was looking at places that were 2,000, 4,000 years old that were still working, like in Rome, where you see markets full of life with old people, young people, fountains, seeing grandparents riding bicycles with grandkids, and these 300-year-old streets and old small shops that were still constantly being regenerated and working. I saw those things and I thought, man, the people who built those things were thinking about a legacy, right? They were thinking about future generations and what they're handing down to those places. And I remember getting on a plane and flying back to Dallas and saying, well, what is our legacy? What are we spending billions of dollars to kind of tell about who we are? And I got home and I saw a lot of these things. And this is actually not far from where I live in my neighborhood. It's this, we call it the high five to make it sound better than what it is, because there's 5 large bridges that all intersect. So I decided I'm going to start showing up at City Hall, because obviously it's going to be hard to make change if I don't kind of start showing up, right? So I went to City Hall. Sorry, I keep clicking ahead. And started saying, hey, I've seen these great places, and why aren't we applying some of these ideas that we're finding from these places that were built with legacies? And they said, well, first of all, Dallas is it's hot. We get to average of 40 degrees Celsius a year, 3 months out of the year. And people said, we're also a car culture. This isn't Paris. But they said, we are doing some planning initiatives, so that should excite you. We have Forward Dallas plans, and we have Downtown Dallas 360 plans, and we have bike plans from the 1980s that have never been built. We have the 2035 mobility plan. I remember seeing that and saying, wow, Dallas is going to be great in 2035. Right? I hope I make it, right? So I decided, okay, I'm obviously it's going to take a while for me to make change at City Hall. So what happens if we just start working on places in our own neighborhoods, right? And I had this old building in my community. So I lived in a part of Dallas called Oak Cliff, which for half a century has been thought of as the bad part of town. And partly is because we had a history of crime, specifically Bonnie and Clyde are from my neighborhood. But beyond that, also this theater, which is kind of ground zero for what people thought was why we're the bad part of town, is where Lee Harvey Oswald was captured after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. In fact, the only reason it has a sign is because Oliver Stone built the sign for the movie JFK. So I decided, I'll start here, right? See if we can help work and make this theater work again. It had been closed for 10 years. I went and met the board of directors. They said, we're trying to raise $3 million, but there's no philanthropy in our neighborhood. People don't want to come to our community. So I thought, okay, I don't have millions of dollars, but I have some friends. What if I brought out 100 friends, and we all painted art together on the ground, and the day before we opened the theater. We're going to come on December 14th and December 15th. We'll have 100 friends, turn it into an instant art gallery, and this is us kind of in the theater building easels. And minutes before we're about to open the doors, we thought, this is probably going to be an abject failure. This theater has been closed for 10 years. It's the middle of winter. We're in the bad side of town. But what happened when we opened the doors was we had 700 people show up. And we sold every piece of art we had created the night before. But beyond that, I had people come up to me afterwards and saying, we've been waiting for somebody to open the doors of this theater and let us use this place again. And I was thinking, like, I was waiting for someone to open the doors as well. So it's amazing how all of us are kind of waiting for someone to turn the lights on to let us use these places again. So kind of drunk with enthusiasm and thinking, well, if we can help fix an old theater, what else can we work in our neighborhood? I started looking at all the old maps in my community. And this is maps from the 1920s, right? And my neighborhood is called Oak Cliff. Right here on the top right is downtown Dallas. But I saw all these clusters of old Main Street style buildings along certain intersections that were mostly boarded up. And I looked at those and I thought, well, why were they working at one point in time? And if you look at these bold black lines, I realized we used to have a tram system, or what we call a trolley or a streetcar. So I looked at looked at those maps, and I said, it was interesting because my Texas theater had 650 seats in it, but I only had 35 parking spaces out front. So the trolley was the reason why that was working in the past. So I started showing up to neighborhood meetings, and we were talking about ways to get people to move back to Oak Cliff and start businesses and to live here. And people had all kinds of ideas. And I said, I've got an idea. Why don't we bring back the streetcar system? And people said, that's crazy. It's been gone for half a century. It'll cost millions of dollars. And I knew nothing about streetcars or trams, but I knew how to make websites because I was a web guy. So I went home and I made a fake website that next night called the Oak Cliff Transit Authority. Looked really official. It had boards and newses and histories and pictures of European trams on the front. And the next week, the Dallas Morning News, our big newspaper, did a story. It said, dreaming of the day the streetcars return. That's what Jason Roberts and other members of the recently formed Oak Cliff Transit Authority are hoping. Right? But there were no other members. It was just me. But I had great people call me from my neighborhood. I had a guy that was a civil engineer said, hey, we have a transit authority. This is great. Can I help? And I was like, yeah, you can help. And so he's like, I'll donate time to do a feasibility study, which is like a $30,000 ask. I had another guy that happened to be this 80-year-old who had enough parts in his garage to build a trolley. So he was this eccentric, crazy guy. So I'm working on this streetcar system, and we decided, okay, we'll make this a legitimate nonprofit. And while this is going on, we started saying, this is going to take us 20 years, right, and millions of dollars. So in the meantime, why don't we start looking at bike networks and trying to figure out how we get people bicycling, like I was seeing in Europe, right? But the thing is, when we talked about bicycling and we championed bicycling in the U.S. or in Texas specifically, it wasn't like I saw in Europe, which was like girls in dresses and guys in suits riding old heavy bikes. What we do is we wear spandex. And we ride for 300 miles and we dope, and that's how we bicycle. So I thought it's going to be tricky for me to convince people to do it this other way that I'd been seeing. So we decided to create a group called Bike Friendly Oak Cliff, and we'll just advocate for riding your old heavy bicycle from the garage and take it to the post office or to the grocery store. I started showing up to City Hall, and I started saying, hey, I've got this great idea. We want to take every road in the city of Dallas and cut them in half and put bike lanes everywhere. And I found out when you're the guy that says that, you're going to have a lot of people like this that show up and say, no, no. I realized it's going to be hard for me to convince this guy to ride a bicycle, right? So we're going to have to try another approach, right? So I said, why don't we just go out and just do like celebrations? We'll come together and we'll do history rides together. And since we didn't have a lot to celebrate, we said, why don't we just follow the trail of Lee Harvey Oswald? So that'll be our big thing, right? And we thought we'd have 25 people that showed up for that first ride, but what happened was we had 150 people show up to the first ride. And what you don't see is me at the front of this group looking terrified, because first of all, I didn't own a bicycle when we started Bike Friendly Oak Cliff. I just loved the idea of having a bike culture. But I also said that I'm not a leader. I don't need to be leading a movement. But people came up to me afterwards and said, like we have been looking for someone to champion these causes. And I found out if you're passionate about something, you have everything it takes to become a leader. And everybody was looking for someone to stand up and take a charge here within our community. And within short order, we had a pretty sizable group to kind of enforce change in our city. So I started looking at other problems. I was trying to figure out how do we address getting more people just to ride in general. So one of the things at my kids' school, kids weren't riding at all. So I said, and there were no bike racks or anything. So I did a program with the PTA, the Parent-Teacher Association, and said, why don't we just get together? We'll make punch cards. If the kids ride their bicycles every day for a week, we'll punch a card. And at the end of the week, we'll all go out and get root beer floats together, right? And we went from 0 kids riding. Within 5 days, we had 100 kids riding. Right. And so beyond that, this ride now happens all of the time, and we've seen a culture that's been reshaped in our neighborhood. So we weren't the bike part of town. We just kept telling people we're the bike part of town. And it's funny how it's become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So people come to our neighborhood, and they're like, I think I'm supposed to buy a bike. I'm supposed to ride around. And okay, so while I'm working on the trolley, I'm also working on bicycling. I started looking in the theater because I became the president of the Texas Theater. I tell people, be careful when you say, hey, I want to help, because within 3 months they threw the keys at me. So that will happen whenever you say you want to take part. But I started looking at these blocks of buildings and trying to figure out, well, why aren't they working, right? Many of these have been boarded up. But when I looked at also what was holding it back, I realized that we'd changed the zoning, so it was no longer allowed to have retail. We could just have light industrial uses, which just meant I could have like an H&R Block or something on there. We changed the streets to widen. We widened them to make them one way, so they made them high speed. And then, you don't have to read this, but we created all these laws and rules that either made it cost prohibitive or illegal to make this block come to life. So we had, if you wanted flowers on the sidewalks, that was going to be $1,000 in permitting. If I wanted to have a shade awning over every window, $1,000 per window. If you wanted to have street cafes, $1,000 times area times market value times 85% times 12%. I don't know what that is. It's illegal for us to have merchandise on the sidewalk, so no book stalls, no bicycles out front for bike shops, all that. And then if you really want to kill your street life, create a law that says it's illegal for crowds to gather on the sidewalk. So we had that too. And all those were from 1941. So I looked at all those laws and rules and looked at our block and said, well, obviously it's illegal for us to do anything to make this come to life. So what would happen if we took a weekend and we broke every law we possibly could? And so that's what we did. We painted our own bike lanes. We added our own cafe seating. We brought historic lightings from prop companies, and we lined them in the streets. We put murals in the buildings. We took the empty buildings, and we put the businesses we wish we always had. So we had pop-up coffee shops and flower shops and bookstores and bike shops. And then we printed off all the laws and the rules we were breaking, and we put them in the windows. And we invited our city staff and our mayor, said, hey, come out to our better block. And they came out and said, I don't know if we're supposed to be here. And we're like, I think we're all going to jail. But they were looking at it and they're seeing life happening and things were working now. And they said, obviously this is a much better way for us to use this block. We'd rather see more things like this happen. So what happened was, after this weekend, we just did this for a weekend to test out the idea, we started seeing all those rules get changed. So the zoning went from light industrial to unanimously getting voted to turn it back to retail. We also saw all those fees get reduced dramatically. So instead of $1,000 for cafe seating, now it's $100. All right, people said, that's great, though you did that when it's nice outside in spring. Try it when it gets really hot, when it's 40 degrees outside, right? So I said, let's take another street, and how would we make this more humane so people want to linger? So take another area, so no sidewalks on one side. I got broken sidewalks on the other side, a lot of empty buildings. There's a pole with nothing on it, just this gray emptiness. So how do we get people to linger on a space like this? So in the middle of the night, we came out with some friends, and we brought out 42 trees. About 42 trees, about 100 bushes to create pedestrian islands so people could cross the street safely. We took old pallets from the trash and we made decks so people could sit outside. We painted our own crosswalks. You're not supposed to do that. We added bicycles to the bike pole, because again, we're the bike part of town. And then we put tables under the trees, and people sat for hours in the hottest weather because it got cooler under the shade. And beyond that, if you see a picture of that, this is what the actual block looked like from the project. And the interesting thing is, I tell people, we had seen so many consultants come up and give us renderings and ideas how great our blocks would be that never got built. So we stopped believing them. We suffered what we called rendering fatigue. So the beautiful thing about this is those are real trees. They're not Photoshop trees. Those are real crosswalks, real decks that people could sit outside on. And those are real bicycles from the community. So we just took the time and energy that it took for us to draw pictures, and we actually just built it ourselves. And beyond that, we took it down after the weekend. And people that didn't know that it was just a pop-up project would drive back the next week with their friends. There's this great block. You got to see it's right here somewhere. All these trees and stuff. And also, the nice thing was people asked me, how do you get like all these, big trees and stuff in the street? And what happened is I had friends that were landscape architects that were doing fancy hotels on the other side of town. And since our side of the town was the bad side of town, we said, hey, have the trucks drive through. And of course, they'll break down, and then somebody will like rob the truck, and we'll just, put the trees out in the street. So it worked to our advantage. People also ask me, what happens when you break all those laws and rules? This is my friend Scott, who helped me print off the rules we were breaking. Scott's now our city council member. So I found there's a one-to-one correlation between becoming a public servant and breaking rules and laws. So this is my friends actually came up to us with a project and said, hey, we got this idea. We said, let's go and do a dog park in our neighborhood. And they went to the city council and mayor, and they talked about doing a dog park, and they said, you know what, it's going to take us 2 years, all these studies, millions of dollars. And this group was frustrated, and they said, we just want to do a dog park in our community now. And when they're standing with me, and we're looking across at this field, and they're asking, like, what would you guys do? And I said, well, why don't we just test the idea in our neighborhood, and we'll just do it in this overgrown field that people are throwing trash in. And they said, that's great. We'll raise some money, and we'll have some meetings. In 6 or 7 months, we'll make a dog park. And we said, well, why don't we just do it next weekend? So that's what we did. We just mowed the grass. We copied all the city's official park signs and made our own park signs. We put out swings for kids, because we found out if you want to make a dog park successful, make it for people, not for dogs, because dogs just need a place to pee. But people will hang out, right? And we figured also, dog parks really aren't that complex when we broke down to figure out what is a dog park. If you guys want to know, if you're taking notes, a dog park is a fence. So if you can make a fence, you can make a dog park. Also, we found it was really important for us to kind of come up with our own motto. The city of Dallas's motto was think big. Right? And what we found is whenever we went with the think big philosophy, that meant we're going to spend $150 million hiring an Italian architect to design a bridge that looks like a fish skeleton. And that, we hope, is going to make 100 little things happen that we love, but the places that I love around the world, whether it was in New Orleans or Paris or San Francisco, had these little blocks that I went to all the time that had 100 little things. So a little cafe, a little flower shop, bookstore, pocket parks, historic clocks, great lighting. And as a community, we can make 100 little things a lot faster than that one big thing that we hope makes a lot of little things, right? And I found we could use things at the hardware store to change the environment rapidly so people could see this. So white duct tape, I found, looks just like thermoplastic paint that cities use to paint stripes on the ground. I found you could use straw walls that we use to keep trash out of the gutters for construction projects, and I can make new curbs, right? And then we can landscape them. We can take the graphics off of our city buses and the scraps, and we can make crosswalks. And then we can go to the intersections that are too big, and we go to the city and say, this is too big, we need to fix this. And they'll say, it's going to take us years and millions of dollars, and say, don't worry, we're going to do it on Saturday. Fix it ourselves, right? And they're taking our plans now, and they just start implementing them afterwards, because they're like, you're already doing community engagement, you're testing the ideas out, you're getting real-time data, and then they modify the designs because we figure out what doesn't work as well, and they can implement those things. People also ask me, how do you get away with breaking all those laws and rules in broad daylight? And I said, I found you can break any rule you want as long as you wear an orange vest. All right, so our work now has gotten into being sanctioned. So it started off as guerrilla, but cities started hiring us. I said, this is actually a great model and method for people to actually experience change first, and to get rid of all these worst case scenarios that's happening in the existing public forums, and to test kind of the most innovative solutions first. So now this is a project we just did. It was in Ohio. So we took this is Akron. Akron is known for, they made the tires for, Detroit made the cars, Akron made the tires. After that industry left, they were left with all of these wide spaces, and they had this depopulation. So we'll go to the communities and we'll start figuring out, well, who's there now and where's their growth? How do we build off of that? So we found, okay, in this space specifically, the streets were overbuilt, but we have a Bhutanese refugee community moving in, so we can work with them. And we have an existing Italian immigrant community. So we can make maps with the neighborhood, and we can design bike infrastructure to thin the streets, right, to make it accessible by multiple modes. We can take the empty buildings and make businesses like Bhutanese restaurants, Italian cafes, art spaces for the community. We can also take the fields and turn them into plazas, right? And so we'll just go with the city crews and fill up their machines with kids' temporary paint. We'll put white duct tape out with the neighbors to show how you can edge it. And then in 2 hours, we get a functioning bike lane, right? It looks just like the stuff you see in any city. And then we'll go and take the empty parking lots, and we'll get some dirt, some hay bales, and some volunteers, and within 2 hours, we can turn it into an Italian piazza, inspired by the Italian community, right? Then we can go in and turn the turn lanes for cars into bocce ball courts with the Italian fraternal orders. We'll go in and we'll take like old banks that have been empty for 20 years, and all they had said that we just have tires and paint. How do we fix this? So in 2 hours, we can show them how they can fix their old banks, right, to make them function again. Again, more tires, so we showed how we just painted and made them into a kid's playground as well. Taking old pallets and making them into decks so people could sit outside, turning empty buildings into businesses with the locals. And this is the actual block in use. So you can see 2 hours prior to this, everyone riding that bike lane was actually building it, right? And we could be able to test these ideas, get people past their worst case scenarios, and implement these things. And now we have a nonprofit, so it's called Better Block. And if you can go to our website, betterblock.org, and you see we publish all the recipes for the things we do. So if you want to make your own green bike lanes in Perth, you can do that, or your own Italian piazzas. We've also started getting more into like taking other problems that we find when we work in an area, and how do we start looking at things that people think of as liabilities and turn them into assets. So in Akron, while we were there, I was getting to meet these Bhutanese refugees, and I was going to baby naming ceremonies, and I was sitting down on the floor eating samosas with the women, and I was thinking like, man, this is something that people would actually fly thousands of miles for to experience, right, and spend thousands of dollars. And so how do we take the problems, in the community like this depopulation and this excess housing that they don't know what to do with these houses, we'll work with this refugee community, and so we can show them how they can turn them back on again, right? So what we've done, this is a project called the Exchange House, where we took a house, we've turned it into a Bhutanese cultural center on the ground floor. The second floor is an Airbnb, so people can go and stay with the Bhutanese community, and the third floor is a family can live there. And what's happened is once we opened the doors on this space, I mean, first of all, we started working with everybody in the community to fix it. So there were felons in the neighborhood that were being rehabilitated, so we taught them how to gut the house and get it prepared. We worked with the Bhutanese kids to show them how they take old pallets and reclaim the wood and use that within the house. We worked with the women that were in textiles in the refugee community. So all the textiles, the bedding, the curtains are all made with the community as well. And now our work is being moved into, this is our office in Dallas. We took up in an old car garage, metaphorically. We thought it's beautiful. And what we're doing now is we're trying to get into how do we build capacity for the projects that we're doing. So because not every place has got excess pallets or scavenged metals and things like that. So how can we use things like digital fabrication? So now we're teaching kids how they can 3D print their blocks, right? And then do overlays on top of those to fix certain things. We do a lot of laser cutting. We also do what's called CNC routing. If anyone's familiar with a CNC router, it's basically you take a sheet of plywood, you put it on this machine that cuts it out, and you can download our designs, and you can cut pieces out. And what you can do is, I found this group in London that was actually making houses this way. So you can cut out these pieces. This is called WikiHouse. But you can see it's like puzzle pieces. There's no glue, screws, or nails. They just friction fit this all together. And we said, well, if you can build a house this way, we can build everything in between a house. So bus stops, planter boxes, we can build cafe seating. So we have a WikiBlock library. If you go to our website, all these designs are free, and we have a lot of these things. What you can do is, there's just a handful of the designs we have, but you could go to a makerspace. Most cities have these now that have a CNC router. Download one of these designs. You can take a sheet of plywood, put it on a machine. This is what it will cut out here, this shape. And you can form a chair pretty quickly. You can see we can cut the wood to where it can be bent, right? But we have all kinds of designs beyond that. We have coffee kiosks. So whenever we had a park in Ohio that we were trying to figure out how do we develop a small pavilion on that people could assemble and sell coffee out of. This is the coffee shop working. This is the table and chairs, 2 sheets of plywood that go together rapidly. You could literally put this on a machine. You could go have a cup of coffee, come back 45 minutes later, and start assembling these things with 8-year-olds. There's a bus stop that we designed, really simple stuff. This is a greenhouse that we did in Florida with planter boxes. Right now we're working on what we're calling a project called the Fab House, where we're digitally fabricating every element of a tiny home. So we're building CNCing the frames, we're doing laser cutting some of the interior accessories, and then we're doing the fixtures out of 3D printing materials. Because we want kids to kind of go to a makerspace and realize that you'll find these 12-year-olds know how to use this software. They can download these files, they can modify these things, and they can start fixing things in their own community. This is 8-year-olds putting together these benches, these park benches that we designed. This is us working in a school, an inner city school in Dallas, building the designs, showing them how they can modify the files themselves, put their names on them, make new legs and seats, teaching them about how to make a great courtyard, having them assemble those things and start fixing the courtyards in their own schools, right? And that Better Block project that we started, basically because I wanted to have a coffee shop and a bike lane in my neighborhood, people started asking us, how did you do it? So we put a how-to guide. We made it open source online so anybody could do a Better Block. And what happened, within the next year, it went all over the country, right? And the year after that, it started going around the world. So it was here in Melbourne, Australia, all the way to Tehran, Iran. And when people from Tehran, Iran called me and asked me about breaking laws, I was like, I don't know about breaking laws in Tehran, Iran. I think the stakes are a little higher. All right, I'm going to wrap up with kind of the street car because you guys are probably wondering what happened with that. So this is my board of directors. We had a small board. My friend in the back who's a civil engineer, and another friend who's now the city council member. We're in Portland, and we're studying their streetcar system. We meet the guy who started that, and he said it took 15 years, millions of dollars. It's going to take a while, but it's worthwhile. You need to go after it. And so we went back to the city of Dallas. We started saying, hey, we talked to the government, and we said we want to apply for some grants to see if we can bring the streetcar back, and they kind of laughed and said, okay, Oak Cliff, apply for all the grants you want. We had a 0.3% chance of getting any money whatsoever, but what happened was we won millions of dollars. And beyond that, instead of taking 15 years, we brought the streetcar back in 5. And all I did was build a website. But beyond that, what that streetcar has done, if you go all along the spine of it, there's new development happening everywhere. So what that has also done is you're seeing it change the landscape for the next 100 years as well. All right, and so this is some of the development happening along it. A lot of things started happening after the Better Block, right? We started learning how to catalyze the community and get things happening in our neighborhood and get things moving. I started working with friends, and we started a restaurant. So if you're in Dallas, stop by my restaurant. Same group of people. We were just figuring out how do we do these things using our combined resources and skills. I just started getting to lecture at Harvard. I got to have dinner with Michelle Obama. I decided to run for U.S. Congress because I had a free April. And then we were in the Venice Biennale, and I remember thinking, like, man, what can stop us? We found all these great ways to get a lot of things happening quickly in our community. But the one thing that completely stopped me was in 2012, I was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. And then everything stopped. And at that point, I remember thinking, like, okay, I'm not going to watch my kids grow up. I'm not going to get to ride the streetcar. I'm not going to get to watch the blocks grow with the neighborhood. And when I was at my sickest, and I needed a lot of help, neighbors that helped me build these better blocks that I brought together started coming to my house, started taking my daughter out shopping and my son out fishing, started filling up my fridge with food. And when I was at my worst, they started doing these campaigns to build a better Jason, to fix me. And so when I tell people what I got out of the Better Block was, it wasn't bike lanes, it wasn't pop-up shops and permanent businesses that came out of those or streetcars. What I got was a neighborhood. And that's what all of us are doing all of this work for. In fact, all that good stuff I wanted is a byproduct of having a healthy, connected neighborhood that realizes why we're here and what we're here to do, which is to create a better place for all of us to grow and thrive for ourselves, for our kids, for our communities. And before I forget, in 2014, I was diagnosed as being cancer-free, so I'll be just fine. Thank you. I want to end it on one last story, because I've been very fortunate because I travel a lot and speak a lot all over the world, and we do projects all over the place. But I had a story just happen to me last week. I was in Lisbon, Portugal, and I had a guy take me around, and we were, and what you'll see in this picture, this is us in this kind of this plaza, and there was this grandmother dancing with her grandchild. So probably a 50-year-old girl and probably, 60s woman. And I remember thinking, like, and I told the guy, I was like, man, I was like watching their dance. I do swing dancing, so I pay attention to dancing. And I'm like, man, those dance moves, that's really interesting. He's like, oh, that's a cultural thing. And he kind of talked about what the dance was about. And I said, in my neighborhood, a 15-year-old granddaughter will not dance with her grandmother. And he said, well, the interesting thing is we realize the value of handing down these legacies to our future generations. He said, honestly, if we lose this, we lose everything. And I thought, we lost that. And that's what a lot of our issues have been right now, is trying to get it back. All right, and that's it for me, guys.